It was an ordinary autumn afternoon in 2004 at Lincoln High School, the kind of day that seemed harmless and predictable. The halls buzzed with chatter, lockers slammed, and students rushed to catch their buses. Among them were Megan Carter and Hannah Lewis, two best friends who were rarely seen apart. Teachers described them as inseparable. Megan was the quiet, thoughtful one with a sketchbook, always tucked under her arm, while Hannah was the bold, adventurous spirit who loved to push limits. Together, they balanced each other perfectly. That day, both girls had stayed a little late after their last class, laughing about something only they seemed to understand. Their friends recalled that nothing appeared unusual. They looked happy, carefree, and ready to head home. The last confirmed sighting was near the school's East Wing exit. They walked side by side, each with their backpacks slung lazily over one shoulder, blending into the flood of students, heading toward the parking lot. According to witnesses, Megan had been humming a song under her breath, while Hannah teased her about missing the bus if she didn't hurry. A teacher even waved to them from the doorway, remembering how the girls smiled back before disappearing into the crowd. But once they passed the library and reached the path that led toward the bus stop, it was as though the earth swallowed them whole. Not one of the dozens of students nearby reported seeing them board a bus, walk home, or meet with anyone else. When they failed to return home that evening, panic quickly set in. Megan's mother called Hannah's parents, hoping the girls were together at one house or the other, but neither family had seen them. What made it more alarming was that both of their bedrooms looked untouched. Their phones, jackets, and even homework assignments were still neatly laid out. These weren't the belongings of girls planning to run away. Their families rushed to the school grounds, retracing every possible step, searching for any clue. But the football field was empty. The bathrooms had been locked, and the old storage sheds stood undisturbed. Not even a single backpack strap or notebook page was found. The police response was immediate, but so were the unanswered questions. Officers interviewed classmates, teachers, and even the bus drivers, but no one could recall seeing the girls leave the premises. The school's outdated security cameras covered only the main entrances and failed to capture anything useful. Every logical explanation seemed to collapse under the weight of one disturbing fact. Two teenage girls had simply walked out of their school at dismissal and then ceased to exist. By midnight, the parking lot was crawling with squad cars, search dogs, and flashing lights. But the girls' trail ended at the same spot, the path leading away from the East Wing exit. As the hours stretched into days, the missing posters began to multiply. Megan and Hannah's smiling faces were taped to telephone poles, store windows, and even the school's own bulletin boards. Candlelight vigils were held, prayers were whispered, and rumors began to spread among classmates. Some swore they heard the sound of a car door slamming near the football field just as the girls were leaving. Others whispered about a man in a dark jacket who had been seen hanging around the school's edge in the weeks before. Still, nothing concrete surfaced. To their families, it felt as if the world had split open and swallowed the girls, leaving behind nothing but silence and endless questions. When investigators searched the girls' homes, they were immediately struck by how normal everything looked. Megan's sketchbook lay open on her desk, an unfinished drawing of a raven staring back from the page. Hannah's room was littered with fashion magazines, her sneakers still by the door, and her diary resting on the nightstand. The absence of packed bags, missing clothes, or any sign of preparation painted a chilling picture. These girls hadn't planned to vanish. Whatever had happened to them, it unfolded suddenly, in the small window of time between school dismissal and their expected arrival home. Detectives ruled out the possibility of them running away almost instantly. It just didn't fit. The first odd detail came from the school's bus driver. He swore he had waited an extra 3 minutes that afternoon because he noticed Hannah wasn't on board, which was unusual since she always sat in the back row with Megan. When she never showed, he assumed the girls had gotten a ride from someone else. That assumption planted the first seed of dread. If the girls didn't take the bus, who had picked them up? And why hadn't anyone seen it happen? Several students reported seeing them heading toward the old football field instead of the bus lane, but the accounts were fuzzy. Some thought the girls had been joking around. Others claimed they were following someone, but no one could agree on who that someone was. Then came the story that unsettled even the most skeptical officers. A sophomore student confessed hesitantly that he had seen a tall man in a dark jacket standing near the bleachers by the football field. He remembered it because it was unusual. Outsiders didn't normally linger there after school. According to his account, the man raised a hand, as if signaling the girls, and they walked toward him. When pressed for more detail, the boy grew nervous and claimed he couldn't see the man's face clearly. Was it a teacher? A stranger? Or just a figment of his imagination, colored by fear and gossip? The police took the statement seriously, but without cameras covering that area, they had no proof to follow. Weeks later, a small but deeply unsettling clue surfaced. Behind the bleachers, an officer discovered a single earring, silver, with a tiny blue stone. Megan's mother later confirmed it belonged to her daughter. The fact that it was found in such a specific, isolated part of the field sent chills down the community's spine. But curiously, there were no other signs of struggle, no footprints, no torn fabric, no dropped books. It was as if Megan had stood there, lost an earring, and then simply vanished into the air. The discovery only fueled wild speculation. Had the girls been lured away willingly, or had they been forced into silence so swiftly that they couldn't even cry out for help? Rumors swirled through the town, each one darker than the last. Some whispered about a white van spotted circling the school around dismissal time, while others recalled a maintenance worker who had abruptly quit his job that very week. Parents began demanding answers, pulling their children out of after-school activities, warning them never to walk alone. The police followed every lead, from possible kidnappers to rumors of cult activity, but every trail ended in frustration. With no bodies, no confirmed witnesses, and no evidence beyond a single earring, the mystery deepened. Each passing day without answers made one thing terrifyingly clear. Megan and Hannah hadn't simply walked off the school grounds. They had crossed into a shadow the town could not see. For Megan's mother, Laura Carter, life froze the moment her daughter didn't come home that October evening. She left Megan's bedroom exactly as it had been, pillows arranged, schoolbooks on the desk, and even the sweater draped over the back of the chair. She refused to change a thing, as though her daughter might walk back through the door at any moment. Each night, Laura sat at the edge of Megan's bed, clutching her daughter's pillow, insisting that she could still smell her shampoo faintly on the fabric. Neighbors often heard her calling Megan's name softly into the night, her voice cracking as though expecting an answer. Hannah's father, Mark Lewis, carried his grief differently. He became obsessed with retracing every possible step the girls might have taken. Each morning before work, He drove the path between the school and his house, pulling over at random spots, searching ditches, abandoned sheds, and even storm drains. He would return home with mud on his shoes, muttering that he was just checking one more place. His wife tried to stop him, but he refused. He told friends that whenever he passed by the school, he felt a strange pressure in his chest, like Hannah was still there, calling out, trapped somewhere no one could see. Both families began receiving strange phone calls within weeks of the disappearance. The calls always came late at night, and when answered, nothing but silence lingered on the other end. On one occasion, Laura swore she heard faint breathing, shallow, uneven, as though someone was holding the receiver close, but refusing to speak. Police traced the calls to a payphone near a gas station 2 miles from the school. But by the time they arrived, the booth was empty. These calls only deepened the parents' torment, feeding the hope that their daughters might still be alive, even as the silence screamed otherwise. As the years dragged on, the family's grief turned into something stranger, an uneasy mixture of sorrow and obsession. Megan's mother began writing letters to her daughter, hundreds of them, stacking them neatly in a shoebox under her bed. She said she did it so Megan would have something to read when she returned. Hannah's father, meanwhile, grew convinced that the old football field held the answer. He often drove there late at night, parking his truck near the bleachers, scanning the grass with a flashlight. One evening, he told a friend he saw lights flickering in the distance. Pale, blue, white glows that seemed to hover just above the ground before vanishing. The police dismissed his claims, but the story spread, adding a layer of unease to an already haunted place. The toll on both families was immeasurable. Holidays became unbearable reminders, and birthdays were marked by empty chairs at the table. Laura stopped attending family gatherings altogether, unable to face the curious stares and whispered pity. Mark grew increasingly withdrawn, speaking less and less, as though words themselves had failed him. Yet through all the pain, one thing remained unshaken. Both families believed the girls had never truly left Lincoln High School. They clung to the idea that the answers, however dark, were still buried somewhere close, waiting for the day they would finally come to light. By 2007, nearly 3 years after Megan and Hannah vanished, the investigation had begun to lose momentum. Detectives who once worked the case daily now shuffled the files into the cold case cabinet, buried beneath stacks of other unresolved mysteries. The missing posters, once bright and urgent, had begun to fade under the sun, their corners curling, their colors bleeding until the girls' faces seemed ghost-like. For the families, this was the most painful part. Watching the urgency disappear from the eyes of law enforcement, as though time itself had declared their daughter's story no longer worth chasing. The leads, once so promising, had collapsed one by one. The man in the dark jacket was never identified. The silver earring provided no usable DNA. Even the strange late-night phone calls eventually stopped, leaving nothing but silence behind. Investigators quietly admitted to each other that they had no direction left to go. With no witnesses willing to come forward, and no new evidence surfacing, it was as though the case had been swallowed whole by the shadows it was born from. What haunted everyone most was the sheer absence of anything. No ransom notes, no sightings, no traces of struggle. Just a void where 2 lives used to be. At Lincoln High, the disappearance of Megan and Hannah became more legend than tragedy. Whispered among new students, who hadn't even been enrolled when it happened. They would pass the old football field with nervous glances, daring each other to cross it after dark. Teachers avoided the subject. though some still kept the missing poster pinned to their bulletin boards, yellowed with age, as a quiet reminder. The school administration eventually stopped mentioning the case at all, choosing instead to push forward as though nothing had happened. But for those who had been there in 2004, the silence was unbearable, like a wound left to fester just beneath the surface. Meanwhile, the families refused to let the case slip into oblivion. They held annual vigils, gathering at the football field with candles and prayers, begging anyone with information to come forward. Local newspapers would cover the story for a day or two each October. But the coverage dwindled as the years rolled on. Detectives rotated in and out of the department, each new one inheriting a thick, dusty file that offered no new angles. Every officer tasked with reopening the case walked away with the same impression: that something crucial had been missed. And whatever it was, it had been buried deep. The longer the case remained unsolved, the more rumors spread, twisting into urban legends. Some said the girls had been taken by a drifter who vanished through the backroads of town, never to be seen again. Others swore there was a hidden tunnel beneath the school grounds, a place where screams could be heard late at night if you stood still enough. Parents warned their children about walking alone, though even they admitted their fear wasn't rooted in logic, but in the heavy, unshakable mystery that clung to the town. It was as though the disappearance of Megan and Hannah had cast a permanent shadow over Lincoln High, one that refused to lift, no matter how many years passed. The summer of 2012 was unusually dry in the small town, and by late August, the overgrown field behind Lincoln High had become a tinderbox. For years, the grass had been left to grow wild, choking the old football field where students once played, until it became a dense jungle of weeds, briars, and waist-high brush. Locals often complained about it being an eyesore, but the school board ignored the problem, preferring to spend money elsewhere. No one could have predicted that a careless flick of a cigarette, tossed by a passerby, would set the forgotten field ablaze and uncover something far darker than anyone was prepared for. The fire started small but spread fast, whipped by dry winds. Flames crackled across the field, devouring weeds and dead leaves, sending plumes of black smoke curling into the sky. Students on campus watched from classroom windows as firefighters rushed in, sirens piercing the air. Teachers herded the children inside, but many still pressed their faces against the glass, watching the flames consume a place they'd always whispered about. For some, the field was a playground of rumors. For others, it was a place they avoided entirely. No one imagined the fire would soon erase years of speculation and replace it with something chillingly real. When the smoke finally cleared hours later, the once dense jungle of weeds had been reduced to charred earth and smoldering patches of ash. Firefighters moved through the wreckage cautiously, stamping out stubborn embers and marking safe zones. But it was one firefighter, walking the edge of the field near the old bleachers, who noticed something odd. The ground in one area had collapsed slightly, creating a shallow depression that didn't look natural. The earth there had darkened in a way that seemed different from the rest of the burned soil. He called over his captain, pointing out how the dirt looked disturbed, as though it had been dug up, then covered again, years before the fire. Curiosity turned quickly to unease when shovels were brought in to test the ground. Just a few inches below the surface, firefighters uncovered fabric, something sinned but unmistakably human-made. At first, they thought it was trash, maybe an old blanket or tarp left behind by vagrants. But as they pulled more of it free, they realized it was a sleeping bag, its material stiff and brittle from age. Another sweep of the area revealed a second one buried close by, almost side by side, as though placed deliberately. The sight sent a ripple of silence through the field. Fire crews were told to stop everything and call in the police immediately. By the time investigators arrived, the area had been cordoned off, but whispers were already spreading. Students who had watched the blaze from their classrooms now whispered to each other about the hole in the ground and the objects found inside. Parents waiting outside the school clutched their children tighter, sensing something terrible had been discovered. No one said it aloud, but everyone thought the same thing. After 8 long years, the fire had burned away more than weeds and brush. It had burned away the last layer hiding whatever secret it had been buried beneath Lincoln High's forgotten field. The moment investigators began carefully unearthing the first sleeping bag, a heavy silence fell over the scene. The material was torn, faded, and partly melted from the fire's heat, yet inside it lay unmistakable fragments. Bones, fragile and pale against the darkened soil. Gloves tightened, flashlights shook ever so slightly, and the whispers of firefighters died instantly. One officer muttered, almost under his breath, that this was no accident of nature. These remains had been placed here, hidden deliberately, and concealed in such a way that without the fire, they might never have been found at all. As forensic teams were called to the site, more fragments surfaced. Small, brittle bones tangled in the fabric, tangled in remnants of chain that had rusted with time. The second sleeping bag revealed even more. At first glance, it appeared identical to the first, but investigators noticed deep slashes in the fabric, as though cut by something sharp. The soil around both sites carried a strange, metallic odor that didn't match the scent of burnt earth. Officers stepped back, shaken. What chilled them most wasn't simply the discovery of bones. It was the deliberate, almost ritualistic way they seemed arranged, side by side, as if someone had wanted the two to remain together, even in death. Among the debris, a small object gleamed faintly in the flashlight beams. It was a lighter. Old, blackened by fire but still intact. When it was wiped clean, initials appeared, scratched deeply into the metal JR. For detectives, who had lived with the weight of the cold case for years, it felt like the first tangible lead, a piece of something solid in a sea of unanswered questions. The initials were hauntingly out of place, a cruel signature left in the soil. Was it arrogance, a taunt, or simply carelessness? No one knew yet. But every officer on the scene understood that those 2 letters had just breathed new life into the investigation. The next days brought a flood of activity around the field. News vans crowded the school's perimeter, broadcasting shaky footage of tents and investigators combing the scorched ground. Students gawked from behind fences, their faces pale, while teachers struggled to maintain order inside. The town, once lulled into uneasy silence, now pulsed with rumors and dread. Everyone wanted to know if the bones were Megan and Hannah. The families, long resigned to endless waiting, suddenly found themselves thrown into the agonizing limbo of hope and fear. They stood near the barricades, trembling, as police cars came and went, each vehicle a possible bearer of the truth they had dreaded for 8 long years. Back at the excavation site, search teams discovered something even more unsettling. Beneath the soil near the sleeping bags, a faint outline of what looked like a third depression stretched outward. Though it revealed nothing but hardened earth when dug, the very shape suggested that more might once have been buried there. Or worse, that something had been removed. Investigators marked the area carefully, unsure if it was a false lead or the shadow of another secret, still waiting to surface. Either way, the fire had done more than expose a crime scene. It had peeled back the surface of a nightmare, one that had lingered just beneath the town's everyday life for nearly a decade. When the initials JR were released to the public, the town's collective memory jolted awake. Teachers whispered among themselves, and former students exchanged nervous phone calls. The letters seemed to point toward one man in particular, Joseph Randall, a janitor who had worked at Lincoln High during 2004. His name had appeared briefly in the original investigation, but no hard evidence tied him to the case. He had quit just weeks after Megan and Hannah disappeared, telling coworkers he was moving on to start fresh in another state. At the time, his departure hadn't raised many eyebrows, until now. Suddenly, the initials on the lighter felt less like coincidence, and more like a cruel fingerprint, left behind in the ashes of the field. Detectives began digging into Joseph Randall's past, and what they found unsettled even the most hardened officers. Randall had bounced from job to job, working late, night shifts, often leaving abruptly without notice. Neighbors from his old rental house recalled seeing him burning trash in the backyard at odd hours, sometimes muttering to himself. Others claimed he had an unsettling way of watching the schoolchildren as they played outside. Yet, in every interview, people admitted they never had proof of anything more than bad feelings. There were no criminal records, no arrests, nothing that could have raised alarm back in 2004. He was the kind of man who slipped through the cracks. Quiet, forgettable, and dangerously overlooked. DNA testing of the bones confirmed what the families had feared, but already knew in their hearts. The remains belonged to Megan Carter and Hannah Lewis. The news devastated the community, but for investigators, it only deepened the urgency. At Randall's new residence, hundreds of miles away, police collected items from his garage: rope, old chains, and notebooks filled with disjointed, disturbing sketches. But the most chilling detail wasn't what he had. It was what he didn't. Nowhere in his belongings did police find the lighter carved with JR. Had he returned to Lincoln High years later to leave it behind? Or had it always been buried there, waiting to be unearthed? No one could answer. Rumors spread faster than the investigation could control. Some residents swore they had seen Randall driving through town after he left, lingering in the shadows near the school grounds. Others believed he had accomplices, someone still living in the community who had helped him. The eerie depression in the soil, shaped like a third grave, only fueled the whispers. Parents spoke in hushed tones about whether Megan and Hannah had truly been his only victims, or if others had simply never been discovered. The idea that more secrets might be hidden beneath the school grounds hung heavy in the air, casting a suffocating weight over the town. Even as police tried to build a case, there were details that refused to fit neatly. Why had Randall kept his job at the school long enough to watch the girls' daily routines? Why had no one noticed him leaving with them on that fateful day? And perhaps most disturbing of all, why, after nearly a decade, did fate choose a fire to reveal the truth? For the families, the answers remained just out of reach, like shadows flickering at the edge of sight. Justice seemed close, yet still incomplete, leaving everyone with a chilling sense that the story was far from over. Even after Joseph Randall was questioned, the sense of closure never truly came. The families received answers, yes, but not peace. Too many questions lingered in the ashes of that field. Had Randall acted alone? Why were the girls buried so close to the place they vanished, as if taunting the entire town? And what about the third depression in the soil? Was it an unfinished grave, or evidence of someone else who was never found? To this day, locals say the field feels different at night. Some claim to hear faint voices carried on the wind, as if Megan and Hannah are still calling out. Others swear they've seen a figure in a dark jacket standing near the bleachers, watching silently before vanishing into the shadows. The fire may have revealed what was hidden, but it also uncovered something darker, that even when secrets are buried, the earth has a way of spitting them back out. And sometimes, the answers we long for are far more terrifying than the questions we ask. So the next time you pass an abandoned field, an old schoolyard, or a place people whisper about, ask yourself, what's really buried beneath your feet?
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.